In order to have an effective golf swing, you must first understand the parts that create that golf swing. And the first thing and the most important thing you take out onto the course is your body. And so I'm going to show you a few parts on your body that are critical for you to understand in order to help get your body to move more effectively. So the first part I'll show you is with my little skeleton. So this is a right leg, and this is a right hip bone. So what I want to show you on that is I want to show you the side of it's actually the side of your femur. So if you turn to your side and you touch the side of your thigh at the very top, you'll feel a very hard bone, okay? I've arbitrarily called this the hip hinge, a hip hinge point, okay? It's not the technical term. I've just called it hip hinge point for ease. Now, if I show you where that is on my body, I turn to my side, and it's located right here at the top of my thigh, okay? So how do I know I'm in the right spot and this is the right point? One, it's going to be very hard. And two, if I take my golf club and I take the shaft, I keep the shaft parallel with the floor and I put it right on that bone, I'm going to see that as this shaft cuts my body in half from top to bottom, that it goes right through my glutes or right through my butt in the back. And so that's how I know I'm in the right spot. So if you just turn and look in a mirror from the side and you touch your hip or your femur and you find a point where a shaft would go right through the middle of your glutes, that is the correct point. That is what we're going to call your hinge point, okay? So that's point number one that's important, okay? The second point that's important is going to be what, again, I'm going to call our hip socket, okay? And the hip socket is where in your hip bone and your femur, this is where the head of the femur, the ball, is going to go right into the socket of the hip. So that's the second point that's very important and important to understand where it is. Now, how do you find it on you? This is how you do it. You can do it one of two ways. I could take a club, I'll just place it on the same side of the socket that I want to find. I'm going to turn it slightly at an angle, and all I'm going to do is I'm going to raise my thigh until it's about parallel with the floor. When I raise my thigh until it's parallel with the floor, what happens is I have my thigh, I have my torso, and in my thigh, where my thigh meets my torso, or my pelvis actually, I have a crease. And so the hip socket will actually be right in the center of the crease. So center being from, or middle of the crease, being from the top of the thigh to the base of the thigh, it's going to be right at the center. And so at that point, that's what I would call my hip socket, okay? And it's at your hip socket is where rotation in your golf swing actually occurs. And so when I go to the top of my backswing, this is where my whole body is going to rotate around the posted thigh. So when I go through my hip socket, you see my whole body just rotated around my thigh, which did not move because it's nice and posted, and you saw no motion going this way, which would make me do a sway motion. So again, if I always rotate through my hip socket, then my body just rotates around this posted thigh. You can see my balance is nice and easy, and you can see that my lower body and upper body have worked together. The other thing that's important about this is that when I go through my hip socket, every time I go through my hip socket this way, my upper body and my shoulders go along with my pelvis, which means that if my target is off to my left and I just rotate my torso and shoulders, you can see I just put my back to the target. And I did that with very little effort. And in this position, again, I'm nice and balanced. So, as a review, the points that we need to know on our body are our hip hinge point, which again is going to be a point that you'll feel a hard bone at the top of the femur. And if I take a club and I get in front of a mirror and I'm turned to the side and I place that club so it's parallel with the floor, I'll see that the club cuts the top and bottom of my body in half and it goes right through my glutes. So that's point number one. And then point number two is my hip socket. And to find my hip socket, I could just take a club, place it here, raise my thigh until it's almost, or it is parallel with the floor, and between the top of my thigh and the bottom of my thigh, in the crease that's formed between my thigh and my torso, right in the center of that crease, that's where I'm going to find my hip socket. And that's the place where I'll rotate when I go to the top of my backswing and when I start my downswing. I'm always going to rotate through my hip sockets. And if I do that, then my body's going to move in sync between lower and upper body, and it's going to allow me to have effective movement, body movement through the golf swing, which is going to allow the club to move effectively and be in the positions that you want it to be in. So the next part of this video, I'm going to show you how we're going to use these parts to do some simple exercises and drills to get your body to move effectively.